Today's lesson will be exploring the Northern Renaissance, or quite simply, the Renaissance outside Italy, in countries like England, Germany, France, and Spain. Before we dig into our topic, I'd like to go over a few vocabularies. First, we have the word Renaissance, defined as a period beginning in the late 14th century, when people began taking an interest in the learning of earlier times, specifically the cultures of Greece and Rome. As the French word Renaissance implies, it was a rebirth in the appreciation of classical times. Next, I'll use city-state. A city-state is an independent state consisting of a city and surrounding territory. Unlike, say, Pennsylvania, which answers to a higher federal law, a city-state stands as its own authority. You'll also hear the term cultural diffusion, which is simply the spreading out of ideas from one central point to the others. I'll also use the word classics or antiquities. This is simply a fancy way to say ancient Greece or Rome. I'll also throw around the word patron. A patron, as in a patron of the arts, is a person who gives financial support to a person, cause, or activity. Last, use the word humanism. Humanism is the belief man has beauty, worth, and dignity. Humanism also holds that life should be based around reason and humanity, not church regulations or church power. Now, on to the lesson. Italy was the birthplace of the Renaissance, where ruins of ancient Rome stood in almost every city. This link to the cultural past made Italy the perfect place for the Renaissance to begin. Starting in the late 1400s, the Renaissance started spreading to countries like England, France, Germany, and Spain. And northern merchants, diplomats, and even soldiers began visiting the city-states of Italy and were dazzled by the beauty of Italian art, architecture, and culture. Many returned home, carrying their love of the Renaissance over the Alps to their homelands. In short, the Northern Renaissance was born of cultural diffusion. With this cultural diffusion came changes to the Renaissance. Although the visitors of Italy wanted to emulate its culture, this proved pretty difficult as their homelands were so different from Italy. First, the northern countries lacked inspiration from the cultures of Greece and Rome. Second, the northern countries had powerful monarchs. And third, the northern cultures were not quite as willing to give up their ties to the Christian church. Let's take a look at the cultural differences between the Italian and the Northern Renaissance in terms of classical culture. Countries north of the Alps lacked the resources of the Italian Renaissance. In Italy, the evidence of classical antiquity was everywhere, affording great inspiration to their artists, their architects, and their sculptors. However, this link between the present and the past was much weaker in the rest of Europe. For instance, an architect in Germany could simply walk out his doors to study the ancient beauty of the Colosseum, nor could a sculptor living in England gaze upon the beauty of Trevi Fountain. Also, unlike Italy, the rest of Europe was rural, not urban, affording little opportunity for the spread of new ideas. Instead of focusing on the statuesque bodies of Greek sculptures, the artists of the Northern Renaissance drew from their own everyday lives and their surroundings, while Italian artists were using frescoes or paintings done with pigment on wet plaster to highlight mythology and the antiquities. Northern artists were practicing their craft using oil paints to perfect straight lines, exquisite detail, and realistic landscapes. A great example of this is the work of Van Eyck, one of the first major artists of the Northern Renaissance. Take a look at his painting of the Annunciation. Now notice the clean lines of the cathedral walls. They look like someone took a ruler and drew them. Also notice the exquisite detail of the woman's attire, the floor, and even the seat cushion. This is an excellent example of the North's propensity toward detail in the entire composition. Now compare this painting to the Italian Renaissance painting, The Tribute Money by Masaccio. Apart from the human subjects of his painting, this work gives little thought to detail. This is a classic characteristic of Italian Renaissance art, where the human form was of utmost importance. Notice how the mountains, the fields, and the ground are roughly represented. It almost seems like they were an afterthought. Now, both of these pieces of art are very beautiful in their own right, but they differ greatly. Another example of this quest for accuracy comes from Albert Dürer, a German artist who is considered one of the greatest artists of the Northern Renaissance. Take a look at his painting, The Young Hare. Again, Dürer's realistic flair makes it look like the rabbit is real, and he's poised to jump off the page at any moment. This is a great example of how the Northern Renaissance focused on creating pieces that realistically illustrated the natural world. Another difference in the Northern Renaissance came in the way of politics. During this time period, the political structure of Northern Europe differed greatly from that of Italy. Unlike Italy, which was a collection of independent city-states, the northern areas of England, France, and Spain were being formed into nations under powerful kings and queens. Germany, like Italy, was divided into several large states, but it was unified by the Holy Roman Empire. Like the princes and the rulers of the Italian city-state, the monarchs of Northern Europe supported the Northern Renaissance, but they did it on their own terms. One such monarch was King Francis I, who ruled during the mid-16th century. He was a great patron of the arts. However, he held the Italian artist in much higher esteem than he did the work of his own subjects. Wanting to be like the cultured princes of Italy, he surrounded himself with some of the most famous artists of the Italian Renaissance, even inviting Da Vinci to travel to France. This appetite for Italian art was also seen in England, where the Tudor dynasty ruled. Henry VII, the first Tudor monarch, mirrored the footsteps of France by welcoming Italian philosophers and scholars to England. Perhaps the greatest difference between the Italian Renaissance and the rest of the Renaissance throughout Europe was in the Northern Renaissance close ties to the Christian Church. This gave birth to Christian humanism, or a mixing of the knowledge of the antiquities, the moral teachings of Jesus Christ. Unlike the humanism of Italy, which focused solely on writers like Virgil and Cicero, Northern Renaissance scholars brought back the older works of the Church, including the texts of the Bible, St. Augustine, and St. Jerome. This Christian influence is plainly seen in the art of the Northern Renaissance. Unlike the more provocative works of Italy, Northern artists focused more on religious themes and undertones. With Flanders, rather than Florence, being the center of the Northern Renaissance, art was much more restrained. Some might say almost proper. Compare the racy works of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus with Van Eyck's Northern Renaissance Madonna and Chancellor, or the erotic work of Italy's Titian with the subdued images of the Netherlands' Vermeer. The Northern Renaissance's close ties to the Church were also seen in the birth of Christian humanism. Erasmus, the most famous of Christian humanists, was born in the Netherlands, educated in Paris, and well-traveled throughout Europe. Trained in both Latin and Greek, he respected the work of men like Socrates, but believed it was man's relationship to Christ that really counted. In his work, The Praise of Folly, he used humor to criticize church leaders for their fixation on church rituals rather than Christ-like values. Erasmus's ideas and works became so popular in the North that kings and princes from all over Europe competed for his services at their courts. Another influential Christian humanist was Thomas More. Born in England, More devoted his life to the principles that inspired Erasmus. He too believed that the works of the classics had value when viewed through the lens of Christian texts. More defended studying classical Greek and Roman culture, believing they could lead to better understanding of the supernatural. Also, he reminded his opponents that the Bible itself was written in the languages of the antiquities. In his work Utopia, More created an ideal society where everyone is concerned with health and happiness rather than wealth and power. This work highlights the Christian themes of charity and goodness, while also including the classic ideas of independence. Although More would eventually lose his head, literally, for opposing King Henry VIII, he and his fellow Christian humanists successfully mixed the study of the classics with church texts, giving the world a new way to understand Christianity. This focus on the church and its pure teachings gave the Northern Renaissance its own distinct flavor and flair. To wrap up our study on the Northern Renaissance, let's review some
To wrap up our study on the Northern Renaissance, let's review some key concepts.
Also,
First, the Renaissance began in Italy, but soon spread to the rest of Europe through cultural diffusion. This new